I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about 576 and why it is my absolute favorite saw for tree work. These dogs do not come with this chainsaw. It comes with teeny tiny little dogs. They look like this. So you can see these are much smaller. When you're running the saw, they don't reach the wood. If you're cutting a big tree or there's an angle on the buttress root or something like that, they don't even hook. And so you're trying to drag the chainsaw through. And so I bought these, which I'm pretty sure these are the ones that come on the larger Husqvarna, the 3120. And that's one thing that I had to change out to make this satisfactory to me. Another thing to be aware of is that these nuts, these are not capture nuts, so they do come off. So they come off in your hand, you can lose them. And then also too, the outside dog, unlike steel, which has a screw that can hold it on, these ones come off just like the Dolmar, so you could lose this, but I use it as a tray for the nuts when I take the cover off. So there's that. Another thing, people often complain and say that Husqvarna has outboard clutches. Obviously that is not the case on this chainsaw. This is an inboard clutch. It does have the rim sprocket, so that's good. I don't think I've ever thrown the chain on this saw. On this cover, these are opposite from steel. So the nubbin that tightens up your bar is right here. On a steel, it would be inside on the chainsaw, and so your mechanism would be right here, and you could just sit here and turn the mechanism. The mechanism they put in the Huskies, I trust more. It's a more reliable mechanism, and I can get the chain as tight as I want, where the steel has some sort of mechanical advantage reversed to where you can't get the chain very tight sometimes on certain saws, and I don't like that. If I want to jack the chain down, I want to be able to jack it down. This mechanism is very smooth. Everything works as it should all the time. You have to get it on there. That's a trick. When you put it on and the bar and chain is already on there, it's easy, but it is a little bit of a trick to get that on. So there's 4 of these poppers. You take them off, and then it's kind of tricky to get this off. Inside this cover, you do have your cold and hot air shutter. So essentially, this comes out and you have to store it when you're not using it. So this little window lets warm air past the top of the engine here through that hole into the air filter. And with warm air in the wintertime, the air is coming in that's so cold. So this was in here, but I hardly use this at all this winter. But this is supposed to be out when it's cold and in when it's hot. Okay? I just have it in. It doesn't make a huge difference. I don't know why they use a felt filter. I'll never understand it. Seems like they could easily transition over just like steel to a paper filter, but you can see, let me show you how much crap I just got out of that. I just got all this stuff out of here, and this saw was running fine. So the tune works really good when the filter is obstructed. It works really, really, really well, okay? Now, when I first got this saw, there was a problem with the shutoff. Now, these wires right here go to the shutoff, and so when you push down on, when you push down on this, you make contact with a metal piece, and then that actually grounds out, I believe it grounds out the coil, but I'm not sure, and there's a bolt right here. And that bolt, I just took it out and I reinstalled it, and I had no problems with the shutoff after that. Filters are easy to clean. I mean, you can clean these off with like a toothbrush and water, and that's what you're supposed to do. Replacing the filter is like really not a thing, as long as your filter is clean and you don't see a lot of material inside here. I've always seen material inside here on any saw that I've ever run, so I don't know what to say about that. But you can see that dust is trying to get in through this little crevice, and it probably did to some degree. So everything is pretty easy to get to on this saw. The complexity, I would say, is lower than a steel. I don't know if that's true. Some people say they don't like working on the Huskies. One of the things about this saw is that it has these old, flathead style screw-ins, but I like these traditional things. The flip outs are fine, but you don't actually have to tighten these very tight because the seal is sealing on the inside of this surface. It's not sealing flat down like that, like an O-ring boss on a hydraulic fitting. it's actually sealing. As soon as this thing is below the surface of this plastic, it's sealing. And you just need to get it in there enough to where it won't come out. So you don't have to, a lot of people think, oh, these things get ruined because they don't seal. If it's not sealing, you can get a new cap or a new, I don't know if you can get a new O-ring for these, but the new caps, and I haven't checked if they're compatible, but the new caps with the flippies might be compatible. I actually do not know the answer to that. So this is just a plastic retainer. I like these much better than the one that steel has, because the one for steel has a single ball on it, and it'll sometimes come out of a little pocket retainer that the ball is supposed to go in, and it's really aggravating. Or on the steel, because that ball is in there tight, whenever you take the thing off and screw it back on, if you ever get any twists in that cord, it shortens that cord up so much that you have to untwist it to be able to get it out and put fluids in. And this is just easier to take in and out, in my opinion, and it's less likely to be damaged. And the internal part spins, and so this cord is always long enough. One of the things that you do notice about this saw is that when you're filling up your oil, you don't have as much room for your bottle. So I actually lift up on the bar once this cap is off, and then that helps me pour without getting it on this handle. But the Husqvarna bottles also have a different design where the pour spout is on the side of the bottle, like a motor oil bottle, and so you're able to turn it sideways and get it in here if you want to do it that way. The tags on these are like a sticker, and that annoys me. The one on a steel is actually like a plastic piece that clicks in, or I don't think it clicks in, I think it glues on. So it's the same thing, it's still a sticker. But if you lose that, you know, how do you know what model it is if it gets sold or whatever? But anyways, so the information about the chainsaw is on this little black tag right here. You see a lot of chainsaws with these plastic things busted off. I'm not really sure why, but I've never had a problem with these getting busted. When you put this on, this is one of the little pet peeves I would say about this chainsaw. It's not really easy to get in. There's a divider right here, a big deep divider. So you need to get this past the air filter, and then once you get past, it always kind of sits up high. And before you clip any of those, you got to make sure it's settled on all sides and that crack is, you know, nothing, right? There's no gap there. Once you have no gap, then you can pop them no problem. I've never had an issue with them. It does have a decompression valve, so right here. Okay. Now in the instructions they say to hit that every time. I'm not sure why. I don't, because the saw starts like it's supposed to. My opinion is that the vibration on this chainsaw is one of the least vibrations of any saw that I've run. Now it doesn't have the power of the Steel 661. It's just not as big of a chainsaw. This is a 76cc chainsaw. It's right at the cross point of power. You're going from like the beginning of professional chainsaws to larger chainsaws. I would describe this as a large chainsaw. Even though, you know, 90cc is like the second largest size. When you go up from that, I believe it's 120, and that's your really big boys. It's a weird spot in the range because I think you go from 60 to 70 to 80 to 90cc. Everybody has a different transition from like your beginner pro saws like 60cc to the 90cc. But this is the best size of chainsaw to work with on a job site. Yeah, so the reason I love it is it's right in the sweet spot. I'm not carrying around a 661. That is a heavy chainsaw. I keep a long bar on it. I like to have one that's ready to go with a slightly shorter bar. Well, it's written in centimeters, 70 centimeters. So it's not too long to handle, and it carries level. See, it carries level with this 25-inch bar, which makes me feel like it's the perfect bar. So the chainsaw is well balanced. I use this in the tree all the time. Whenever I'm cutting down a large tree, this is the saw I like to have. The 562 is fine, but I only run a 20-inch bar on it. So when you go up into a bigger tree, it's really nice to be able to cut it from one side or the other and not have to climb over to the other side of the limb when cutting. So this is probably my best saw for climbing once I get done with my 201. So let's get outside and I'll show you what this thing can do. I'm going to be processing some wood today. I find these to be better than the steel one because the steel one, it's like a quarter turn and it's supposed to be faster, but a lot of times if you overfill the oil, you can't actually get that thing in, and then what happens is workers will push that and turn it and it's not locked in, and then they send the saw up into the tree or something and the cap just fell out because it, like, the mechanism gets fouled up with too much oil. That can't happen on this saw. I overfilled my oil and I just pushed this thing down and screwed it in and it just went in no problem. So I don't have any issues with this versus the steel, which I often have had issues with. I've had caps get lost on the steel before. I've had caps come off while running the saw. I've had ones where I couldn't get the thing to go on and I had to sit there and struggle with it, and I don't like that. So this I definitely like more. So dicing up these big huge rounds is one of the tests of a powerful chainsaw because it takes a lot of torque to be able to continue pulling the chain when those long strings, you know, when you're noodling a log and cutting through it sideways. Those long strings get bound up really fast inside the back end of underneath the plate where it covers up the sprocket and everything. It always seems to get built up with a lot of debris and stuff when you're doing that. It just pulls in these long strings of wood and obstructs the chainsaw from turning. And so I would say that the 76cc range, that's right where you start really being able to do that. If I have a piece that's 15, 16 inches deep and I'm trying to dice it, it's really hard to do that with a 60cc. You can't even do it with a 50. They just don't have the power and torque that's needed. So I would say that that's one of the benefits of having a saw this size. If I could only have one saw, like I said, I think it would be this one because I can still do all my basic groundwork with it. My arms will get a little bit tired if I'm cutting little stuff, like if I'm just cutting up something small, for example, that needs to go through a narrow space in someone's yard or something, then I'll get tired because I'll be making a lot of cuts and I'll have to move the saw around really quick to get the job done. For big cuts, I mean, it's great. 25-inch bar, you can, from both sides, you can cut almost any tree down with that. See, it's got plenty of torque to get through those dice cuts. Oh yeah, so I'm running steel chain today, and having like a good high-end chain like that makes a huge difference. My Oregon chain doesn't cut the same, but the output on that saw is very good when you're cutting hard woods. This is another reason to use the bigger saw. If I'm running the 562, it's great at 60 cc's. It's got plenty of power. It's considered a pro saw. But when you're cutting a piece that's 18 inches or something, 16, 18 inches with a 60 cc, it doesn't matter how good your chain is, the saw doesn't really have the power to stay cutting a hard wood like that. And so you have to sort of be gentle and ease into it. Don't push too hard. Change your angle up so you're only cutting a little bit at a time. Where the 576, I can burn right through something, no problem. As long as I've got a sharp chain, I'm cutting nice big rounds much faster. And so again, that's another reason. If you're just cutting soft wood or something, a lot of time you can get by with a smaller chainsaw cutting a big cut. But like I said, this saw falls right into the sweet spot of where you can do almost all of the cutting that you'll ever need to do. Obviously, it doesn't sub for a for a climbing saw. Yeah, I would say overall it just boils down to being a really reliable saw. It starts, it runs like it should. It runs like it should as soon as you start it. There's no like extended warm-up cycle. My auto-tune saws, you know, it's technically considered auto-tune. The Husqvarnas, for some reason, my newer Huskies with the auto-tune, they're very sensitive to getting warmed up first. You got to sit there and wait for them. If they're not hot, they won't run properly, and you can sit there and try to rev the engine and get it to warm up faster, but it's kind of annoying, you know, having to sit there and wait for a chainsaw. And so obviously it's a thing of the past. I mean, they've moved on now, but you can still get the carbureted models with the standard adjuster screws. But I have had a problem with this saw mysteriously bogging down and not being able to rev up, usually on humid days, and just being really weird and touchy. That I think was related to the auto-tune, but and I never figured out what it was because the dealerships had such a long lead time on plugging the computer into it and checking it out, and I just was like, whatever, you know, I'll just tune up, make sure everything is good, make sure it's got a good spark plug and stuff. And I don't know, but I think it had to do with the computer compensating for humidity or other factors. It could be it's like capturing like a really hot, humid pocket of like gaseous gasoline or something, and then it's like causing a bad reading on the computer. But I have no idea. I don't know. What I do know is that this is my favorite saw to run, even still. Having a little issue like that happen once or twice, I mean, it's aggravating when it happens because you don't want your saw to be unreliable. So if it's not working that day or whatever, and I have to go get another saw, that's frustrating, especially if this is the one I just sharpened the teeth on it or something like that. Now I gotta figure out if the other one's sharp because I was planning on using this one, etc., etc. Fiddled the choke button back and forth, and I could keep it running if I fiddled the choke, but it wouldn't run. It was weird. It was really weird. I tried changing the spark plug. Didn't try changing the spark plug. Maybe that's what I should have done. Anyways, moving on from that, it really is a tremendous machine. I recommend it highly. I've had multiple people get cut by this chainsaw. I don't know why. I do not know why. But like I said, I had 2 people get cut by this chainsaw. They weren't wearing chainsaw gear, and so they got cut in the leg. And it's totally irrational to me. But everybody always gets cut on their left leg, and so I think it's a postural thing. And I think for a lot of people too, they're used to running smaller chainsaws, and then when you give them a bigger saw, and they don't really know how much torque and power it has, and so when they're in a situation where they're stuck, that's always the situation, by the way. Unless someone loses their balance, the reason why that they get cut is that they make a cut on the wrong side, on the load side of the branch, and it compresses and pinches the bar, and then while they're trying to get the chainsaw out, they've got the chainsaw revving, and so as soon as it breaks free, the chain starts to turn. And you can't rev a chainsaw out of a spot where it's pinched. Everybody who does chainsaw work knows that. But for guys that don't do it a lot, they wouldn't know. And so I would say it's a little bit surprising, I guess, the power and torque that it has, and it could definitely catch you off guard. I even, a couple times today, because I got a steel chain on there, which is very responsive, I was cutting something and it actually reacted and pushed back on me, and it scared me. But I knew what to do and take the finger off the throttle. That's what you do. But yeah, it does do that. It can do that to you. It's got an inertia brake. I mean, it will kick. If it kicks at you, it'll lock instantly. I've never had any concerns about safety with myself running it. But I have even met another guy who had the prior chainsaw, this 575 XP, and he had a guy that he had multiple people get cut by that chainsaw too. And so he said, I'll sell it to you on discount. I didn't want it because it sounded like it needed some work done to it. But yeah, so I think it just sort of runs in the family a little bit. But I wouldn't let that deter me from running this saw. To me, it's the pinnacle of chainsaws. Nothing I'd rather really be running. If you said I'm going to take away all your chainsaws, I'd probably make more money if I kept a climbing saw. But this chainsaw right here would be the saw that I keep for sure. It's so versatile. You can put a shorter bar on it if you want to choke it up, lighten it up a little bit, and use it for smaller cuts. But that 25-inch bar is really the sweet spot for chainsaw bars, and you can do so much with it. So anyways, I'm gonna have to cut out like 90% of this video, but I hope you guys enjoyed this review. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We are trying to make better videos for you guys, but it is a process. So I will see you in the next one. Have a great day.